Good morning, I'm WaywornWyrm, and welcome to my channel. And welcome to episode 15 of Hoard of the Dragon Queen, The Wrath of Tess. Cora started studying the carvings immediately, as she was the one most knowledgeable of dragons of the group. Partway through her studying, she stopped and looked up. "Don't touch anything!" she almost shouted. Everyone froze in her tracks and looked at her confused. "Why?" Morin asked. "A good number of these dragons have spouts hidden in their mouths. I'm not sure why. Until we figure it out, don't touch anything." Tess's eyes went to the box immediately, then looked over to the attendants. "It's a trapped box, isn't it?" she asked them point blank. One of them nodded before getting elbowed in the ribs for their trouble. Her eyes narrowed, and she pulled out her great axe. "So here's what we're going to do. All of us are going to step out of this room, and one of you will get the box and set off the trap. You'll then bring it here, at which point I will heal you to the best of my ability. The rest of you will die." Everyone in the room, with the sole exception of a single attendant, looked at her shocked. The sole attendant stood up firmly, looking at Tess in conviction. "Try it. I dare you." Tess's reaction was lightning fast. With a moment that seemed to be both faster than it should have been, but also almost lazy in the movement of her arms, she spun her axe around and severed the arm of the attendant. As the attendant fell to the ground, writhing in agony, Tess looked at the other three. "Any more objections?" They shook their heads and got up, forgetting their weapons in their haste. They shuffled out of the room with Garrett, Morin, and Flintfinder. Mara quickly followed on their heels, leaving only Cora behind. Tess walked back to Cora and gently put her hand on her shoulder. "Come, we should leave this room." Cora looked back at her and snapped, "Just a minute! I haven't figured everything out yet." Tess removed her hand and held both of them up in surrender. Okay. Have it your way." Then she left the room to join the rest. "Okay." She began looking at each attendant. "Who's gonna live? And who's gonna die?" One of the attendants held up both hands placatingly. Wait! If I tell you how to open the chest without setting off the trap, will you let us live?" Tess thought about it for a moment. Intriguing offer. Maybe. Will you renounce the cult and swear on pain of death you'll never make contact with them again?" Each of the attendants nodded eagerly. "Fine, tell me," was her short reply. The one who held up their hands began to talk. "In Frulem Mondath's chamber, she has a key for the box. Also, don't remove it. Doing so will also set off the trap." "Interesting. Well, we can't have any of you following us, or alerting any of the others, so I must knock you out. My apologies." The attendants nodded in defeat and awaited her judgment. It was swift in coming, and once they were all knocked out, she raised her axe to decapitate one of them. "Wait!" Flintfinder called out. "What are you doing?" Tess swung her axe and killed the first attendant. "They have no intention of keeping their promise, just as I have no intention of keeping mine. Sparing them will prevent no greater evil, but killing them might." She raised her axe again for a second, and noticed no one tried to stop her. Flintfinder simply watched while the others looked away. Killing Cyanwrath was a large blow to the cult, and I'm sure causing them to leave here early was as well. Her sentence was punctuated by the killing of the third attendant. Just as I'm sure that killing Frulem Mondath will be a blow. But we need to make sure that this ends here as quickly and cleanly and fully as possible. If they come back at some point to find everyone they left in this cave system dead, it will strike more fear into the cult than any story anyone left alive could ever tell. Flintfinder nodded, seeing wisdom in her words, though he did not agree with the words themselves. You make some points, Tess. I'm not convinced how good they are, but they are points. This time we will go with what you say and see how it works out for us. Personally, I am troubled by killing enemies who have surrendered. Noted, Tess said as she walked back into the room and put the last attendant out of their misery. Once the grisly business was finished up, Cora called them all back in the room. Okay, so here's what is going on. The large dragon over here is Tiamat, clearly. She was banished to the Nine Hells quite a long time ago and has been imprisoned there ever since, as I'm sure all of you are more than well aware. But it is important, so... Now, I'm not sure if the volcano is artistic license or if it's a real place, and if it is a real place, which real place? But it is something we should keep an ear out for as we continue investigating the cult. Also, interestingly, generally Tiamat's red head is seen as primary and in front, since it is the middle of her heads. But in this, it shows her black head as the primary head. Also, almost half of these dragons... At this point, she paused to indicate the dragon carvings around the room, seem to be of black dragons. Apparently, whoever carved these sees black dragons as more important than any other kind of dragon. Given that Cyanwrath was clearly a blue dragon, I doubt it was him. If I had to guess, I would imagine that Fralu Mondath favors black dragons. I'm not sure what that means, if anything, but it seems to be what's going on. Flintfinder nodded. Let's go and try and find these dragon eggs. I think whatever else happens here today, it is our responsibility to destroy the eggs. We cannot let them hatch and become a tool of this cult. Today, before they even hatch, they die. Everyone nodded and looked grim. It was trying enough on all of them that Tess murdered several enemies. But now they would have to come to grips with killing a dragon in its egg. They were not sure if any of them were ready for that. With the clear exceptions of Tess and Flintfinder. But they would find out very shortly. The direction to go to the dragon hatchery was not difficult to determine. There were only two exits from the shrine. One led to a ladder and a trap door. The other led deeper into the caves. Their guard was up, and when they entered the large chamber with 2 levels, Garrett pointed out that there was a second depression on the far side that was smaller than the large sunken layer. Very quietly, they snuck over to the area and managed to surprise the 4 kobolds who had been hiding down there. Garrett started the fight by leaping down the 10 feet into the pit with the kobolds and attacking them with gusto. He killed one with his sword and a second one with a well-placed hand chop. Cora shot a mote of fire at the third, burning it to death. Morn shot another mote of fire, this time at the last one, causing all 4 kobolds to die before they had time to do much more than realize they were under attack. The group cautiously moved toward the stairs, leading down to the main sunken level after Garrett climbed a makeshift ladder to get out of the area he had jumped into. Their caution paid off when, as they walked into the chamber with Morn holding a lit torch, 2 wingless dragon creatures moved out from behind 2 pillars and tried to circle around behind them to cut off their escape. Mara charged one of the drakes. She solidly hit it with her mace, although it didn't seem to be a very great hit. Then the drake managed to jump out of the way of her blazing light. Morn shot 3 rays of scorching heat toward the drake that Mara was engaged with. They looked tough, and he wanted to bring them down as quickly as possible. All 3 rays hit their target, and though they clearly scorched the drake, it was still standing strong. Garrett picked up on what Morn was trying to do and rushed to that drake. His sword sliced deep into it before a kick solidly connected with the drake's side. An elbow flew into the drake's ribs as Garrett tried to finish it off. Sadly, he was unable to in that flurry. The drakes then went in for the attack. The one that was the focus of the group's attacks bit at Mara, taking a decent-sized chunk out of her as it did so. It then tried to attack Garrett with its tail. It had managed to just catch him as he tried to duck out of the way, and it buffeted him hard. The other drake moved to cut off the exit, and apparently prepare for something. Cora took a deep breath and pulled a knife made out of ice out of the humid air. Then, with an almost snap of the fingers that held the knife there, was a small flash, and suddenly there were 2 ice knives that shot out toward both drakes. Both Mara and Garrett were able to dodge the explosion of the knife that they knew would be coming. The drakes were not so lucky. One of the drakes died as the knife exploded, while the other, who had been almost untouched by this point, managed to survive. Tess walked over to the final drake and took her greatsword and swung at it. She hit hard and sunk her blade deep into its hide, but it did not die. Then it was Flintfinder's turn to attack. His longsword struck the drake well, but it was still holding on. As he swung with his short sword, the drake grabbed the sword in its mouth and flung it into the darkness. It was not prepared for the sear of Mara's holy light, which seared deep into its flesh. Then came her mace, which crushed one of its hind legs. Garrett ran over to the now greatly injured drake and finished it off with a thrust from his sword. He took no pleasure in the action. He just knew it must be done. While 2 of the dragon eggs were in plain sight and were easy to smash, it took a bit of searching before Garrett found a hidden 3rd egg. This one was also smashed before they decided there were no more eggs to be found down here, and that it was time to go back to the shrine and up the ladder. They knew they were likely about to face Frula Mondath, and it would probably be as hard or harder than the fight with Cyanwrath. Even more so, since they were unsure of what Frulum could do. Thank you so much for listening to the 15th episode of Hoard of the Dragon Queen. Make sure you tune in on Friday for a Friday show, and tune in on Sunday for the Tomb of Annihilation game.